Welcome to Scott Bryson Beyond the Service. Tonight I'm super excited to introduce you guys to a good friend of mine, Ryan Van Deusen, and a former colleague. Tonight we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to interview Ryan and his wonderful wife, Rebecca. Thank you guys for joining us. How you doing?
Hey.
Hey, Scott. Great. Thanks for having us, man.
Oh,
Good to see you.
You're quite welcome. So tonight, like I said, we're going to just have like a three-way conversation. I want Rebecca to jump in whenever she feels led to give her 2 cents, and then I'll have some questions directly for her probably. But before we get started, Ryan, why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about you and where you're from and a little bit about your personal life.
Okay. Yeah, I was actually born in San Juan, Puerto Rico. My father served in the Navy during the Vietnam War. He was stationed out in Puerto Rico. He was with military intelligence and was working out there. So myself and my only other sibling, my brother, were both born in Puerto Rico. We lived there for a couple years. First couple years of our life, we moved back to my parents' hometown, which was a small town outside of Rochester, New York, called Williamson, New York, a town of, I don't even know, 5, 6, 7,000 people. I had 90 people in my high school class. Played baseball and basketball there, and then ended up going to a community college in Canandaigua, New York, where I got an associate's degree in criminal justice. I ended up transferring to a 4-year university. It was a college at the time. It was called Cedarville College. Now it's Cedarville University. I played baseball there for my last 2 years of college. Got my degree there also in criminal justice, which I spoke with my professor back in New York, and he said, hey, if you don't want to be anything but a cop, then go ahead and get criminal justice. But if you think that might not be your career field, then do something else. And that was all I needed to hear. You know, kind of like the path of least resistance, I'm going to take the criminal justice route. So I ended up meeting Rebecca there both years. We met my junior year coming in, but we didn't start dating until the end of my senior year. I think it was in 94. So that's where we first met. And then, so that's kind of my background, where I grew up and how I came about with my degree and how Rebecca and I met.
Well, that's great. So how long have you guys been married for?
It's going on 30 years. It'll be 30 years in September. So 29 right now. We're going into year 30.
That's very good.
With 3 kids. We got 3 kids now.
Yeah. So how many kids do you have? 3?
3 boys. The oldest is Caleb. Caleb is a captain in the U.S. Army. He's stationed out in Kentucky at Fort Campbell. And then we have Joshua, my middle son, who's a police officer in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And then my youngest is Jacob, and he is also out of our house. He owns his own home as well up in Rockingham County, and he works for a trucking company out here in Kernersville. So we get to see the kids quite often, other than Caleb, who's about 8 hours away.
Right. Well, that's great. So you guys have been married for almost 30 years. So have I. I think we've been married 28 years. It's just kind of, unfortunately, it's kind of unusual, right, to have people married 10, 20, 30 years. So hat tip to the Van Deusens. That's great. It's unfortunate that that's become unusual these days. So we'll probably, as we get into the interview, I'd like to talk about what's kept you guys married, because everybody knows marriage is great, but it's also tough at times. And so I know a lot of that's going to be centered around your faith, which we share. So we'll get into some of the weeds on that later. But let's talk about your career. So when you got out of college, you had the CJ degree. Where did you start working?
So in 1995, I got hired by the Winston-Salem Police Department down here in North Carolina, which is what brought us down here. We were married in September of 95, and then I had started in the police academy 3 months before that or so, in July of 95. So once we got married, obviously she moved down here. We moved into an apartment, and if you remember those days, if you were a police officer, you were able to stay in some of these apartment complexes with a nice discount, because they weren't the greatest areas to live in, and they wanted to have police around, police cars around. So that's where we initially lived, was in this 1-bedroom apartment in Winston. And if you know Raphael,
Yep.
there was some Secret Service guys that ended up leaving the PD that also lived in the same apartment complex as me, Raphael and Chris. I think you probably know both those
Oh
guys.
yeah, of course, absolutely.
Matt, he's in
Yeah,
Charlotte now.
yeah, of course. That's good.
But
And so,
there was a number of us that ended up leaving Winston-Salem at that time.
yep, I'd forgotten that you and Chris worked together. So how long were you a cop? And then tell me about your transition over to the service.
So I was a police officer for 4.5 years here in Winston, and there were some guys that had started leaving. Rich, Raphael, and Chris was really the big one when he left. We were pretty good friends back then. We bought houses in the same neighborhood. We lived in the same apartment complex. And from talking to him is what really precipitated, I think, me ending up applying to the service
Mm-hmm.
in 99, I believe it was, 98, 99 time frame. But, I really enjoyed being a police officer. I enjoyed being a cop. I enjoyed the squad that I was on, the guys that I worked with, uh, working the streets, the drugs and the guns and the running and the gunning and all that stuff, the foot chases. It was a lot of fun. But as you start having kids, and it might be a similar story that you have, Scott, too, that you start thinking about, how you're supporting your family, the dangers involved uh, with the line of work that you're doing, and can I do this better somewhere else? And with a degree, that obviously gave me the opportunity to open up some doors federally. Hopefully, if I was good enough to get hired,
Mm-hmm.
is really kind of how I looked at it. But we did a lot of praying. We were going through a Sunday school.
God's will.
Yeah, knowing God's will was the name of the class that we were going through, and we really felt after prayer and going through it that maybe the Lord was leading us to the Secret Service.
Yeah.
So we applied to see where the Lord was going to lead us.
That's really good. And so, did you process through Greensboro? Or Raleigh. I can't remember how that worked.
So Greensboro was not around back then. It was through Charlotte, so
Okay.
I had to go through Charlotte for that.
Okay. And then, so you
Yep.
processed through
But
Charlotte.
I missed the job. I really liked police work.
Yeah. Oh, I did too. I
Yep, I processed through Charlotte. Had the Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I enjoyed being a cop. I was only a cop for 2 years, but I knew longevity. That wasn't going to be what I wanted to do for 30 years. I wanted to try to take care of my family a little bit better financially, if I'm being honest. And I had met a guy who was a Secret Service agent, and I just thought protecting the leader of the free world sounded pretty impressive. And so that's just kind of, but I did it twofold. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and then I also wanted to take care of my family. To your point, so where did you process through Charlotte, and then where did you? I don't remember where you started.
Yeah, so I processed through Charlotte, ended up getting hired, and they said, if you want the job, they give you a call. If you want the job, we will offer you New York. And so we talked about it, and we're like, yeah, we'll go to New York. And then, like, the next day, they call me, and they're like, hey, we think that, the ultimate choice is yours, Ryan, but the SAC made some phone calls, and we think it might be better for you and your young family if you go to Saginaw, Michigan. And I was like, Saginaw, Michigan? I never heard of Saginaw, Michigan. Where's that? And so he said it was about an hour and a half north of Detroit. Um, and at the time, Rebecca's parents lived north of Detroit in Lake Orion, which was about an hour and, I don't know, hour and 20 minutes from Saginaw. So I think I called him back and said, no, we're good with New York. And he says, no, I'm not trying to lean you one way or the other, but the SAC, was able to pull some strings, and we really think you should look at Saginaw. But if you really want New York, you can go to New York. But why don't you think about it another day? And you're kind of like, well, what's this guy? They're trying to tell us we should probably go to Saginaw. So we talked about it some more and decided, you know what, we'll go up to Saginaw. It's a smaller office. Traffic is better. They said that they like to have cops in these smaller ROs because we can pick up a little bit quicker
Yep.
on the investigative side of things with our backgrounds. So we picked up the family, and as you know, you didn't have to deal with it, I don't think, because you're already in Charlotte area. But we had to move ourselves from Winston-Salem out of our home, all of our goods and everything, and the kids, and move up to Michigan on our own dime for the first one.
Yep.
But then every move after that, subsequent to that, the government would be paying for.
Well, I don't know what their agenda was, but it sounds to me like there may have been a little divine intervention there with her parents living by. So that was probably good for the family, wasn't it?
Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
it was good for the family having
financially.
parents close by. I think especially with all the travel that we did
Mm.
as phase ones in our career. It was funny, I got to SATC and there was a guy in my class named Will who was going to, I think he was going to Savannah, and he started laughing at me and he said, "You're the one going to Saginaw?" He goes, "That's where I was supposed to go." And I told him no, I wasn't going to Saginaw because he's from Georgia. I think he was from Savannah. So he ended up staying in Savannah, and I think I was the one that got tagged to go up to Saginaw.
Oh my gosh.
But it was the Lord's will. The whole thing
Yeah.
was His will. It worked out well for us. Her parents were not too far, so we did a lot of traveling as new agents in our career, which never seemed to let up. Even as we got further along, we expected, I think, some of those things to slow, like we'd seen the senior guys in our offices back then. But I think we kept getting tagged
Yeah.
all throughout the career. I don't think it ever slowed down.
Rebecca.
But that first move was the beginning of where our careers started.
Yeah.
And I made that move by myself.
Yeah, because I was in training. I was at
He
Fletsy.
was at Fletsy,
Oh.
and I made the move by myself. I purchased the house by
Oh.
myself and then moved into that house by ourselves. And so that was the beginning of learning our roles
Yeah.
together and me being very independent.
Now, did you have any children at that time?
Two,
Two. So.
Yeah, we had our two oldest ones. Our youngest, or our middle one, but youngest at the time was only 6 months old, which was difficult
Mhm.
because I remember coming back. I think was up in Michigan at one point. I came back between FLETC and SATC, and Joshua didn't even recognize who I was. I went to hold him, and he started crying
yeah,
and didn't want to come to me.
Yeah.
And I remember that hurt me as a father,
Sure.
that my son doesn't even know me because I'm gone so much that
Yeah.
in the military folks deal with this stuff.
Sure.
I'm all the time, but
Yeah.
it definitely if it was a turning point in your life where you're like, oh man, my son doesn't even know who I am. He doesn't
Yeah.
even want to come and have his daddy hold him.
Yeah. Well,
But
that's
she
why.
did, yeah, she had to do all that on her own. As you know, the spouses are have to be strong spouses to have our line of work or the
Yeah.
careers that we had. Very
Yeah.
supportive.
Absolutely. Well, that's why I'm glad that we have her on tonight because at some point I'd like to interview my wife just one on one and let her sort of tell her story because if you don't have a strong, independent woman, it ain't going to work, right? And that's not to say that
Mm-hmm.
that you have to be like a feminist or anything crazy like that, which I don't think she is and my wife isn't. But you have to have a strong, independent woman, especially when you're raising babies and moving and all kinds of things. I left my wife and my oldest child in the hospital, which is this isn't my interview, so I don't want to get into that too much. But I feel your pain because I wanted this job for 2.5 years. I finally got it, and then my wife and my child are in the hospital and I had to leave, and I didn't even want to go. So that was pretty miserable. So I feel your pain there, and I'm sorry you had to do that. But Rebecca, do you want to talk for a minute about some of the struggles and like just some of the things that like? Did you guys ever have a minute where you're like, this isn't going to work? We need to go back to the police department. I'm going to lose my mind. Did you ever have any of those conversations?
Probably more on my end than yours, wouldn't you?
probably more on his end than mine. I think for me personally, I still joke about it. Sometimes he might hear me say, "Are you ready to come home and be the boss of me?" You know, and the reality is, I had to learn very early that when he's not here, I get to be mom, dad, I play all the roles. But my goal as a believer, I wanted to be able to have him walk through that door and take on that responsibility as husband, father, and the head of our home. And so I had to learn how to balance that early. And that's hard when you're already naturally an independent woman because I was on my own a lot. But I think I did okay, but I'm sure there were challenges along the way, but I think it turned out all right.
Well, I mean, you're still together
Absolutely.
30
Yeah, I think
years
it was
later.
important for us to get involved in a local church
Sure.
uh, soon, Scott, like getting into Sunday schools and small groups and being a part of a group of believers under a good tutelage with a good pastor that we had out in Saginaw. Was definitely it's a key to our marriage. Praying together, having devotions, having devotions with the kids, trying to be very specific with that when I was back
Mm-hmm.
throughout the career.
Yeah.
But it's important for us as a marriage to
Yeah.
keep God at the center of it.
Right.
But I had some issues with the job, as I'm sure you did, and I heard you interview Dean the other day. He ended up going back, but I thought I had the running and gunning out of my blood. And when you come on this job, it's not the same as working the streets and you're running call to call. You're working cases and getting into papers, and counterfeit to me was the closest thing I had to working the guns and the drugs on the street. And I had a blast working counterfeit, which nowadays, there's really not a whole lot of counterfeit cases, I don't think, going on. But
Yeah.
wiring up informants and flipping guys and going in and making buys, that was fun. But I actually did call the PD back to see what it would take to, hey, what do I got to do to come back? I was just curious. And they said, hey, how long have you been gone? And I think it had been a couple years or a year and a half, 2 years at that point. And they're like, oh, you'd have to go back through BLET again. And I was like, oh, man, I'm not going back through BLET. I went through that. Then I went through Secret Service for 6 months and then go back through a BLET class again. I'm like, I could pick up the radio and go do the job right now. And he's like, I know you could, but you'd have to go back through. And so that pretty much was the nail in my coffin more than hers, that, we're going to stay here and make this a career.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate that sometimes we're kind of thrown from the frying pan into the fire, aren't we? But it's like that's a sort of sink or swim, and unfortunately, a lot of people sink, but you guys made it, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast. Is yeah, I want to hear some war story type stuff from guys, but I want to try to help people. There's a lot of things out there for the military folks, and rightfully so. A lot of organizations that help the military. I want to try to figure out a way to help my brothers and sisters in blue. And right now, I guess this is my platform for now. I don't know what this is going to turn into, what it's going to look like later. But my wife and I want to help young people. I don't know how many people are watching this. I don't think I have a tremendous audience yet, but I want to interview people like you guys, so that we can kind of pour into the lives of the younger couples who are where we were 25 and 30 years ago, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it's important. And we have a son who's in law enforcement now and another one in the military. And yeah, they need it too. I mean, they're going out and working the streets, and, that there's a lot that you see. Rebecca's very cognizant of talking with our daughter-in-law about that stuff and trying to be a support for them and help them. And hopefully in that way, they've gotten involved in our church. And, really, you've really got to put Christ at the center, Scott.
Yeah.
If you don't in this career, there's just so many things that you see and do that it's no wonder marriages fall apart so high in the military and law enforcement career fields.
Speaking of that, let's just go back in time just a little bit. Let's talk about the home interview, because I remember mine like it was yesterday. I had two guys come to my house and tell all the horror stories about the job. And one of the things they beat into our head was there's about a 75% divorce rate on PPD, which I don't think it's that high, but they really tried to scare us. Rebecca, do you remember that? Do you want to talk about like the gloom and doom that the guys talked about there in the home interview? Do you remember that much at all?
I do. They did ask me specifically if I was prepared for him being gone all the time. I think that outside of me just saying yes, I understood, because that's why we're here at the interview. I grew up with that as well. My father was in the automotive industry and he traveled a lot. So I was already kind of accustomed to that upbringing. So I was kind of aware of it. But yeah, the home interview I thought was kind of more of like that scare tactic, just to make sure that maybe not him, but me for sure, that I was prepared for what the future was going to be, which you're not necessarily ever really prepared, but you know, I do remember it.
Yeah, they definitely put the fear of God into you
Yeah.
for the amount of travel and what the job's going to take from your spouse. You know.
Ryan, I know we said a few minutes ago, try not to use last names, but do you remember who the two guys were that came to your house? I'm just curious.
No, I don't even remember if it was two or one. I can't
Two.
remember. Was it two? Yeah, I don't remember,
Mm-hmm.
Scott. I was just excited that I'd actually made it through the process
Yeah,
and that they were going to hire me. You know,
yeah,
I was tickled to death that I'd made it.
yeah. That's
Didn't
good.
think I deserved it, but
Yeah,
I was more than happy to sign on the dotted line and let's go.
yeah. So you did Saginaw. So let's fast forward back to where we were. So you did Saginaw for X number of years, and then so did you do two phase one assignments, or were you able to go from phase one in a smaller office straight to protection?
Yep. So I did phase one all in Saginaw. I remember when I was up there, they had transfers. I think it was to New York, to LA, San Fran. I think Dallas was on that because my buddy Mike was able to get back to. You were probably on CAT maybe with Mike for a little while. He got back to Dallas in his phase one. But no, I just did. I think I ended up doing 4.5 years in Saginaw. And in '04, that was before they did this whole DPD thing. They kind of had, you know, I don't know if it's picked out or whatever, but they allowed you to have a little bit more of a choice
Yeah,
in PPD or VPD if you wanted to go to DC. And so I thought for us, I thought VP was the best for our family at the time. So VPD was my first choice, and I ended up getting it. And then almost immediately, I want to say within a few months of me getting over to VP, they had put the kibosh on the PPD, VPD. You know, if your SAC recommended you and whatnot, you were able to get to kind of those details of choice. That they put the kibosh on that and started forcing everybody over to DPD. And I don't know if you got involved with that, or if I know you were a couple years ahead of me. Um, so that was luckily for us, or a blessing for us, that I was actually able to pick the spot where I wanted to go.
that's good. So that was Cheney era. So were you with Cheney the whole time, or did
Yep.
you get some Biden time in too, or how long were you there?
No, I got there in July of '04, and I left in July of '08. Because if
Okay.
you remember at that time too, if you did a VP assignment, you only had to be on the protection detail for 4 years.
Yep.
But if you did PPD, they forced you for 5.
Yep.
Um, so that was another, you know, in our opinion, a way to get back to some more normalcy
Mm-hmm.
quicker. So, and I remember being in the White House and talking to the PPD guys and, complaining about it and how it wasn't, necessarily fair that, we were only able to do 4 and they had to do 5. We're all standing outside of the Oval or the Roosevelt Room talking with each other and stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was a big reason. Another one was the parking situation on the ellipse. If I had to go work a jock, obviously I had to deal with the parking situation on the ellipse, but parking up at the VPR in Massachusetts, we didn't have those same issues that you had to deal with on PPD. So that was another, uh, you know, pin that I liked as far as a quality of life issue, is not having to get there an hour early and continually drive around the ellipse looking for a daggone parking spot.
Yeah. I I remember
And
that,
it's
and
gotten worse from
I
what I've heard.
did not
It's even
enjoy
harder
that.
now. The ellipse.
Yeah, no, the 5 years. So it was a 5 year commitment, but because I had gone to CAT and SOD got created and all that, I ended up doing right just under 6 years. My counterparts like Eric,
Hmm.
Easy E, we were in the same PDT class. He goes to VPD, I go to PPD, then he goes to INV, then he gets promoted, and I'm still sitting in the cat truck. So it's like you guys definitely seem to have the fast track to
Yeah.
promotions. I was like, man, what am I doing? But it was a good experience. But I definitely did not enjoy parking at the ellipse. That was a loser. I don't know why they can't figure that situation out. But
Yeah, no fun for sure. Anytime we had to go up and work the jock, that was a pain in the neck and God bless you for having to deal with that. And like I said, I've heard that it's even worse now, especially for the hump agents.
Yeah.
Running around there with staff trying to get a spot. So
Yeah.
that was a big reason. The 4 years, I felt like on VP, you were able to get to start doing sites and working the shift and riding Air Force Two. All this stuff, I feel like we got more of on VP because we were, a little bit. Actually, back then we were probably quite a bit smaller than PPD was back then.
Mm-hmm.
I think now they've increased the size of these details where they're fairly similar. But it gave me a lot of opportunities to go out and do more advanced work and work the shift. Yeah, more development. I got into ops, near the end where I worked a 6 month tour up in our operations section, which, again, I don't know if I would have had those same opportunities on PPD.
Yeah.
I don't know, but just a lot more. I felt like more development. But on the campaign, you get out there in '04, and I'm doing, I don't even know what it was, 5 or 6 airports straight in a row, and finally my lead called back to ops and was like, "Hey, do you think we can give Van Deusen a site? He's done, all these airports. Maybe we can give the guy a site this time." So I got my first site, I think, in Romulus, Michigan, which was just there in Detroit. I remember that one because I had lined the site with school buses to block all this line of sight. Where the VP, where Cheney was going to arrive, and the visit went great, and everything went off without a hitch, and everybody loved the buses. The bosses loved the buses, and get back, and next thing you know, they get this. I guess the school got a bill for the bus drivers for moving all the buses, and it was like thousands of dollars. And so I'm getting a phone call from the 14 up in ops, and he's like, "Hey, what the heck, man? Why didn't you tell us about this? We have to approve." I'm like, "Man, they never said anything about that." Like, I asked them, and they said, "No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. We're not going to charge you. We're going to get the buses out here." And then, at the end of it, they wanted to charge us, and the guy's telling me, "Well, this is a democratic state. This is a union state. We can't just do this stuff for free." And I remember that was a bit of a stressful time for me as a new agent on the detail, thinking I'd kind of screwed myself there. But that was now it's something that what I did later on in the job as a supervisor. You're looking at that kind of stuff and making sure that we're not being charged for this stuff, and you're talking to the right people ahead of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that panned out for you. Okay. Your immediate supervisor can make or break your life, and I know you know that all too well. So hopefully he was cool about it, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
worked itself out. So tell me, because
Yeah,
I don't
very cool.
remember, and then tell the audience, where did you? Well, hold on. Before we get into that, let's talk to Rebecca a minute. Rebecca, what advice do you have for young wives that might be living this right now? Because when you're on full-time protection, it is a 24/7, 365 thing. What kind of advice do you have for the young ladies out there right now listening?
Wow, it's a great question. As a believer, I really, for me, lived on, prayer. I had a very long prayer list, and every day I prayed off of something new. I lived on the mere fact that if he invited me to go with him anywhere, I always felt like it meant something that he needed me to be with him. So I always took that as of importance to him. It may have really meant nothing, but I always took it as something being significant for him, that it was important. So I always took that little stuff and took it to heart that, okay, he's asking me to make it an effort. So I would make that a possibility if we could for the kids. If you're anybody, I think, and we all do it a little bit differently, get yourself in a group. I know that some of the Secret Service, for sure, they have groups, they build relationships. Some areas that we've lived or do it better than others. And I think that you can play a role in building those relationships so you have that connection. If not, it's in your church and having somebody to call, which I did a lot because I had terrible health issues, and he wasn't there to be able to help me through some of that, and I needed somebody to call. But I think you need to have that close knit relationship. We did that in the police department, and you can do it with the Secret Service too.
That's good. That's good. So you guys made it through protection, didn't get divorced. That's a check in the right column. And then you moved into phase three. For the audience that doesn't know, phase one is early career, phase two is protection, and phase three, you go back to the field or headquarters or maybe get promoted. What happened after your VP time, Ryan?
So during my time on VP, I actually was selected. You have to test out, and I got selected to go to the rescue swimmer school. So I passed rescue swimmer basic school in '05. So I was a swimmer with Cheney anytime he went out to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or Montana, Idaho, all that stuff. I was out in Croatia with him on the Adriatic Sea, and actually scuba dove with his daughter. They put us through a whole bunch of anybody that was a rescue swimmer and a scuba diver got put through advanced training to go scuba diving with his daughter. So I was out in the Grand Caymans with her. Actually, that was a trip that I brought Rebecca out on. She was out there for I don't know 5 days, 4 or 5 days, and we got to spend some time in between the dives with the daughter. So when I left VP, there was an opening at our training facility for the rescue swimmer program. So I put in for that and was selected to go to that program. So I went to the rescue swimmer program, and then that's where I spent the next 3 years from '08 to 2011 running the rescue swimmer program, and then also PTing the new recruits that came in and running water safety, basic survival classes and stuff. I don't think we did a lot of scuba diving. We kept up our certifications and everything in the tank, and still going diving out in Fredericksburg. There was a quarry out there, but as far as diving with protectees and stuff, I did not do that there. So my time at training was filled with being on the water, being in the gym, being in the tank, running, working out. It was a really neat assignment. I had a great boss out there. Matt was a wonderful boss, great leader um, that I learned a lot from during my time there, as far as leadership qualities that I wanted to have in myself that I saw in him.
Yeah. I don't know if I remember you doing that or not, so I'm glad I asked. That sounds like a really good assignment. Someone's going to pay you to PT. That sounds pretty good to me. So,
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, it was great. I was actually willing, and we were driving all the way from Stafford, Scott. So
oh yeah,
I had a 60-mile one-way commute up 95 and then around the Beltway on 495
yeah,
to the BW Parkway. So it was, you had to go to the bathroom before you left the house or before you left the office and hope you didn't get stuck in an accident.
yeah,
And there's actually a buddy of mine that I was there with. You know him, Scott. You and Scott worked in Charlotte together, I think, in the first part of your career. You're
yeah,
both phase ones in Charlotte. He was
yeah.
a Greensboro police officer. So Scott was a boat driver on VP with me. Scott and I were on the second ladies detail together for a very long time. We got to be pretty close friends, and then we were out at training together. He was the boat driver, and I was a rescue swimmer. So we kind of were able to add to this program with Matt's help. Where we started doing recertifications for swimmers, and we'd bring them out, and Scott would drive the boat, and we'd actually do life-based scenarios with the boat out on the Chesapeake. Because Cheney had left office at this point, now it was Biden, so there's no need for this boat that we had purchased to be out on the Eastern Shore. So we brought it over to the training facility, and we were able to use that to really up the training game for the swimmers.
That's really good.
But Scott was a big part of that too in the program.
Yeah. Speaking of Scott, do you speak to him much anymore? Do you guys stay in touch at all, or?
Yes, we text. I don't even know, probably 4 or 5 times a year. We'll talk to each other. Yeah, he's still up in the Northern Virginia, D.C. area, punching
Yeah.
up there. He's not on the job anymore. He's
No.
got a private sector.
Yeah,
Private sector
I've
gig.
asked him to come on here. He would be a real good interview because we used to get into a lot of stuff in Charlotte when we were young agents. We were still full of ourselves. We weren't really done being cops yet, and so we almost shot a guy one night,
Yep.
which is a story. I'll let him tell sometime if I can get him to come on here. I think he might have signed an NDA, so I'm not sure if he can come on here or not. But yeah, anytime I went out with Scott, we were always bound to get into something. That's for sure.
He's a good dude,
He's
man.
great.
Real good dude.
I wouldn't want him mad at me.
Hard charger.
I wouldn't want those big hands grabbing me.
No. He does have some big
But
hands. He's a big dude.
banana fingers.
Good dude though.
Oh, he's a great guy. Okay, so let's get back on track. Sorry, I derailed us there for a second. So, Rebecca, thank you for your patience. This couple of dummies talking
Yeah,
about weird
absolutely.
stuff. You probably are like, "What's wrong with you guys?" But I do remember the drives to training. I was never stationed in training, but I had to do a lot of training, and I lived out west on 66, so I was 60 miles as well. So I would take 66 to 495 to the BW, and it was 60 miles is 60 miles. You're not doing it faster than an hour, and some nights it was 2 hours. So it was
No.
oh, it was horrible.
Yeah, Scott and I had code words because if he left 5 or 10 minutes before I did, we'd have code words on which route to take. Should we get off 495 and get on 295? Do we stay and get off this Capitol? I think there was an exit for Capitol Boulevard or something, and there was a back way you could go back around and then hit on 295. And we'd be sending each other updates. So the one coming in behind that was 5 or 10 minutes late was able to hopefully cut his commute down a little bit because it was so rough.
Yeah,
But yeah, you. But the thing with 66 is you guys had to fight the sun both directions.
yeah,
When you're coming in the morning, you had the sun going up in the east, and coming home, you had it
yeah,
setting in the west. So you're constantly fighting that sun that I didn't have to deal with on 95.
yeah,
And we had the HOV,
yeah,
right? So we could hop in that HOV with our Secret Service vehicle or with our placard up there and shoot in a little bit quicker. But
yeah.
there's always backups at the end.
Of course.
But at least it got us the majority of the way home.
So after your
But training was a great opportunity.
yep, it sounds like it. So after your training time, did you get promoted from there? Did you have another assignment before you got promoted?
Nope, I ended up. They come to you and they say in town or out of town. So Rebecca and I talked about that and came to the decision that we would go out of town. And my thought was, at the time, this was 2011. So you think about the housing crash in '08. The house that we lived in Stafford was not worth what we'd paid for it. So we're going to look at taking a loss on that. So we'd made the decision. My parents and brother actually have a sibling that lives in Lancaster, PA, along with my folks. So we knew Philadelphia would get us closer to our parents, and Rebecca had a lot of family in the Lancaster area as well. Actually, all your family except for her parents. So I said I'll go out of town and I'll do Philadelphia. So obviously I got Philadelphia. There wasn't a lot of people that wanted to go to Philly. So in 2011, again, July of 2011, these July timeframes, it's like they stuck to that 4 years in the detail, 3 years at RTC. So it was always in this July timeframe. And so July of 2011, I got moved up to Philadelphia, and that's where I started as a GS-13. I did not get promoted out of training. So I got sent up there and was immediately put into the protection squad. And they saw that I had done ops on VP, and Biden was the VP at the time, Scott. So he lived in Wilmington, which was under Philadelphia's umbrella. So that, Wilmington was literally, I don't even know, 30 minutes south of Philadelphia on 95. So the way I looked at it too was I've got this house in Stafford. We ended up buying a house in Philadelphia that needed a ton of work. It was really a piece of junk house, but it was in the right location. We had about an acre and a half.
Diamond in the rough.
Yeah, diamond in the rough. That's how they advertised it too. An acre and a half of land, about 15 miles west of Center City, Philadelphia, in a smaller town called Newtown Square. Great town. We loved it. So we ended up buying this house, and for the next 7 years, just put all kinds of time and effort and money into it to turn it into something very nice, and a great place to live, great place to raise the family. The kids now are moving into junior high and high school, so we're able to settle them down through that time frame. But they put me in the protection squad. Rebecca ended up going back to work part-time initially and then full-time before we left. So in the protection squad, they had some issues in the protection squad with open spots. They heard that I had done VP ops, so they're like, "Hey, you did VP ops. Why don't you do ops for us in Philadelphia? You can do Philadelphia ops, and since you're familiar with VP." And I'm like, "Hey, I was on Cheney. I'm not familiar with this guy at all." But I got in there, learned it, and I did the operations section and the intelligence section for Philly for 3 or 4 years. It was until 2015, which is when I got promoted for the first time. I got the ATSAC, and they put me over the Philadelphia Ops squad, protection squad.
That's great. And you just touched on something I was getting ready to ask Rebecca. So, Rebecca, my wife stayed at home. She did work some here and there, but for the lion's share of my phase 1 and phase 2 time when the babies were growing up and I was gone all the time, she was a stay at home mom holding the fort down. I know a lot of women do that. So, at what point did you do that, and or did you go back to work, and what did you do while you were supporting Ryan?
Yes, for the most part, I stayed home. Brian and I wanted me to have that consistency. So if I was there all the time, then that would be beneficial.
Yeah.
From time to time, I did step back into the classroom. I had a degree in elementary education and special ed. So I would go back and do that depending on where we lived for a short period of time to, you know, I don't know,
Help.
work, pay the
Yes,
bills.
very helpful.
I went and got my master's during that time frame and just carried on. And our kids went to private school for a year or two. And so, because of where we lived, it was a
Yeah.
necessity. So,
Yeah.
we just did different things along the way. But for the most part, I stayed home until we moved to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And then I went back to full time, which was my original set career, was to work with adults with intellectual disabilities.
Okay, that's great. I know that not everybody.
Yeah, and not having that second income,
No, go ahead.
not having that second income, and then having her all of a sudden start bringing in a little bit of money was, a huge thing.
Yeah.
Even if it was, a few $1,000s a month, when you're not used to that,
Yeah.
it's very helpful.
Yeah, I remember.
Makes you feel more free.
My wife and I chose the same path. We wanted her to listen, and I'm not saying one's better than the other. I know a lot of women that work full time through the whole thing, but as a Secret Service spouse, I don't know, hat tip to the women that did that, but like we just decided we wanted Elizabeth to raise our babies, and make sure that they were taken care of while I was gone all the time. And then she did go back to work when they were in school and things like that. And so for all those years with only having that one income, and then all of a sudden she's working and there's more money coming in, I'm like, oh wow, it was nice. Things weren't quite as tight because, as you guys both know,
Oh,
living
yeah.
in these metropolitan areas, it's we made pretty good money, but we spent a lot of money. It takes a lot to live up there.
No, it's very
Yeah.
freeing. And it gives them, I think it gave her a lot of purpose. She loved her job. She really loved
Yeah.
working with the adults. One of the guys punched her nose one day. She broke her nose.
It was a very fulfilling job.
People
It's
stripping down, having to call the cops because they're, basically you need an involuntary commitment order on them. So she's got to call the cops because they're acting up and being assaultive. And, but she loved it. I felt bad. I felt like her parents were probably like, why are you letting my daughter do this? But that's what she wanted to do. She
Yeah.
loved doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
I felt bad when she got her face punched in, but she didn't care. She was tough, and she's like, got right back in there and kept doing it. She loved it.
Rebecca, that sounds crazy.
when he says it like that, it does kind of, but all human beings, right, are here with a purpose. And, in a place like that, we have an opportunity to
Yeah.
help them feel loved, cared for, and we need people like me. And there are so many people at the place that I worked at that really served that community well.
Yeah.
And that's where I felt like I was serving our community
Yeah.
with great love and with passion.
That's good. Well,
Well, I think you were very good about sharing the gospel when the opportunity presented itself.
Yes,
You
yes,
were.
I did have a lot of opportunity to share Christ there.
That's
That
good.
is very true. That is
Well,
true.
that's really good. And so I was going to say, we're kind of getting in the weeds on our faith a little bit now. So obviously, as believers in Jesus, you guys have made your marriage work because he's been the center and the focal point. Same with my wife and I. My oldest son just got married a few weeks ago, and so one of the things I said to them was God comes first, which I was preaching to the choir because they're believers too. But God comes first, the spouse has to come second, and then the children are a close third. Because I think we're doing ourselves a disservice if we, it's easier said than done because you love your children in a different way, but you've got to date your spouse, right? You have to be intentional. So, do you guys want to talk for a minute about what you guys did to be intentional, especially when you're raising? I have two boys and a girl, so it was pretty wild at my house too. But raising three boys, I'm sure it was off the chain at times. What did you guys do, like date nights or what? Obviously, going to church and praying together, but what kind of things did you guys do to make sure your marriage stayed healthy?
Well, honestly, life was very busy when they were younger, as you probably remember. We had three sons, we were doing sports, very, very busy. So when he was in town, the honest answer, there's a lot of times we just went to a coffee shop and it might have only been 30 minutes. He worked a long, long hours and so did I. And so between getting the kids to wrestling practice at 5 a.m. and then back at a pickup at 6 or 7 p.m. at night and making dinner, that's all we were going to get sometimes was a coffee. And then probably, I don't know, every once in a while we would go downtown Philly.
Mm-hmm.
But that is, yeah, honestly, that's probably really the most of our dates a lot of times.
Yeah, it was very
Yeah.
demanding. Our job was very demanding, and in
Yeah.
Philadelphia, it was very demanding.
Yeah,
So,
you weren't on the road,
right,
but you
we
were.
had Biden right just
It,
south of us, so there was
yeah.
tons of work to do. Uh, 2016 election, I think after we went through inspection, we had 164 visits to Philadelphia that year that I was overseeing the ops, and that's a lot. That's a lot of visits, and it wasn't just me; it's all the guys. They're all working hard. The guys in ops, the guys in the other squads, constantly down in Wilmington and Rehoboth, and you're close to New York, you're close to DC, so they occasionally send you down there. You hop the Amtrak, and you can be up in New York in an hour, hour and a half, and same thing with DC. You're right centralized, which is what caused all the visits to come up there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it was very demanding in Philadelphia, for sure.
Well, I think I know what Ryan's going to say about this, but Rebecca, I'm interested to hear what you have to say. So, as a young agent, like I started in Charlotte, and as a young agent, you're trying to be a pleaser and you're just a good worker, so the hours are long. Then you go to
Mm-hmm.
protection, and when you're gone, you're gone. So the wife, she's holding the fort down because you're gone. 2 nights, 2 weeks, whatever it is, but mama's got it. I almost think that it's harder when you're in town, like Ryan working in an ops position. You're in town, but you're at the office for 8, 10, 12, 16 hours a day, especially with a visit going. It's almost worse. To me, I always thought it was almost worse. Yeah, you get to come home and sleep in your own bed, but you feel the pressure of, I want to go to the soccer game and I want to have dinner and I want to see my wife, but you're just stuck at work. Did you guys experience the same thing, or did you maybe not?
Um, yes, I probably can share two stories in this. I would say first, when he left being on the road all the time and he said he was going to be at home every night of the week. And some of my friends who probably watch this will probably really remember this. Um, I was worried I was going to have to cook dinner every single night of the week now. So that was a problem because I had three kids and the boys were very happy eating cereal, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, pancakes. We would have breakfast nights. That guy, he's not interested in any of those kind of dishes. And so I had to say, okay, I had to revamp my whole philosophy of eating real dishes, and the kids weren't eating pancakes for dinner anymore.
Yeah.
So that was an adjustment. And there were definitely more than once or twice that he would be home after being gone for 5 weeks come home for one night, and the kids would be in tears. And I know I was mad, and I'd be like, it would have been easier if you just stayed in a hotel. And that's not very nice of me to say, but it's just an honest answer. That there are sometimes that frustration of, I know you're tired, but we are tired
Yeah.
too. And you get there, you get to the end, but every once in a while you say something that, I don't know, 25 years later, we do laugh about it, but
Sure.
I know that I'm
Yeah,
sure everyone's upset.
yeah. I remember coming home on VP and having to go out the next day for something else, and you just got time to wash your clothes and
Oh, yeah.
repack and get back up on the road. That mess, it's hard on the kids, hard on your spouse. You're wanting to spend as much time as you can, but they got to go to bed, and when they wake up, you're gone again. Were you out at the Olympics at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was 5 weeks for me. I don't know if you were out there for that long, but she was pregnant with our third, fully pregnant, while I was gone for 5 weeks out at the Olympic Village. Where were you? Where were you at?
Was that '02
Yes.
Yeah, 2002
Salt
Olympics
Lake
in
City
Salt Lake.
stuff? I was doing in-transit CSU,
Yeah.
so I had a pretty good assignment, but I was working like 5A to 5P or
Oh yeah, I was
something
going to
like
say
that.
you had a great assignment.
Well, thank God I had a car with a heater because it was cold as crap. But I will tell you this: he's sitting right here. My cameraman and my editor, Luke. He's my baby boy. He's 23 now. He was not walking when I went to the Olympics, and when I came home, he walked to me to the airport, and it crushed me.
Mm.
So I missed his first
Oh, yeah.
step. So that was all. That was cool.
Yeah,
That was terrible.
Yeah.
it's crazy how you remember certain things like that, or like my son not coming to me. There's little things that tee off in your brain that affect you as you go throughout your career.
Yeah. And I think as
But
men,
I look at that and I think there's a lot of things that
no, go
I was
ahead.
going to say, I think there's a lot of things that you guys did right. I mean, Ryan, he called every night and spoke to the kids. He came back and was um, very conscientious of the time that he was away from the kids and took each one out to breakfast and spent special time with them and trying to cultivate that relationship too. Like, so you might have missed it or you might have missed the birthday, but he always did it on a different day to make those things special,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
you
Well,
know?
I think
And
we
that's
got
important to remember.
I think we got a lot. I think we got a lot right. We got some things wrong. I know me personally. I got a lot wrong. I'm sort of dreading interviewing my wife because, like, I know I was hard to live with. I'm probably still hard to live with. I'm trying to get a little softer in my old age without becoming a beta male. It's hard to be an alpha dude who's a Christian and be nice at the same time. It's an odd box to be in. It would be so much easier just to be a freaking jerk across the board, which I'm probably am more than I want to be. But I always felt like I was a pretty good dad. I don't know that I was always a good husband. I got a lot wrong, but I always loved my wife and my children, and we're still married. We're not divorced, and my kids don't hate me. So I think we got something right, and I know you guys did too. And I'm really always proud and humbled to be around other people that are very similar to my wife. And even though I've never met Rebecca before, and Ryan and I kind of got to know each other better later in our career, but you guys give people like me hope, and I'm really proud of what you guys have accomplished for each other and for your children and for the Lord. And I thank you guys for persevering through all that stuff, just like the rest of us, because some people don't make it.
No, you're right. Yep, it's tough. You talk about alpha male, and our whole career is about our control, right? We control events, we control sites. We think then we come home, and you've got to kind of take some of that back. And I probably put some of that on my wife or on my kids, where you're trying to control them because you're thinking, if I can't control, then I can't be safe. If I can't, you're keeping yourself up at night thinking about all the what ifs for whatever advance you're doing, and it's hard not to bring that into your personal life. Same thing as a police officer. You've got to control situations. So I think it probably makes us difficult people to live with.
Yeah. Is there anything, Rebecca, before we're kind of coming up on an hour, and I think my microphone's about to die, is there anything that you would like to, any closing thoughts that you might want to impart on the audience, whether it be women or men or young couples? Here's your chance to preach the gospel or whatever you want to do.
Um, yeah, I don't. Maybe for us, our goal was is to make sure our kids felt like they were loved despite Ryan being here, and so together we made a very conscious effort to just work together. So at the end of the day, not just this week, but next month, next year, as they are as adults, that they felt like he was still here, a part of it, even though he was gone for a lot of it. And today, I don't know. I mean, we don't think we did it perfectly, but they do feel very confident. They don't really remember the long weeks and the long trips and being gone forever. And I'm sure, like I said, we could have done it better, but we feel very confident that when you're putting that extra effort in together, both sides, when you're on the road and I'm over here, and I had to put effort into that phone call. I didn't talk to him. The kids got to talk to him on that 10-minute phone call. And that's really important that you make that sacrifice together on that
Yeah.
for the kids.
Yeah. Ryan, any closing thoughts,
Thank
buddy?
you.
No, ma'am. Thank you. Ryan, what you got, buddy?
Well, I guess I go back to the whole control thing, and I did the major site for the Pope in 2015 in Philadelphia, and that was a large outdoor event on the Ben Franklin Parkway. We had high ground all around us. The Pope was going to be on stage for 3.5 hours, and it wasn't just this visit, but it struck me as standing on the stage for the Pope before he got there, and I'm looking around at all the skyscrapers, and I'm like, how in the world? We've done all this work. We've got every asset known to man for us, but how do I keep this guy safe with line of sight concerns and whatnot? And it just brought me to the book of Proverbs, and this really struck with me for the last part of my career, even when I got into Greensboro, and now that I'm running my own small business here in Kernersville, that in Proverbs 21:31, it says that man prepares the horse for battle, but the victory is the Lord's. And I remember thinking that on the stage of the Pope and saying, hey, I've prepared this horse for battle. I'm prepared, but really this victory, if it's going to come, is going to be coming from the Lord, because we can't, there's stuff that can be outside of our control. And that stuck with me. And I still pray it to this day, even with the stuff that I do with this job. Lord, I prepared this horse for battle, and I pray that you'll give me victory, and that I give you the glory for the victory, for having it be a success.
That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. That's really good stuff. What I would say, closing to the young people listening, if there's any young people listening, there may be 4 people watching this thing someday. Who knows? But the day when you're young and you're in your 30s and you're gone all the time, and the wife's holding the fort down and the kids are going crazy. The days are long, but the years are short, and so please don't blink, because I miss those days. I mean, some of my best memories are from my PPD days, because it was quality over quantity, and I know my wife was probably tired and worn out, but I loved coming into the craziness and the kids going. It was just. Those are some just really good memories. I know we missed a lot. If it exists, we missed it, right? Holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, we missed a bunch of stuff, just like the military folks do. But some of my really good memories are from those days. And so my advice to the young people would be, don't blink, because it's going to be over with probably before you want it to be. But anyway, Ryan and Rebecca, thank you guys so much for your time. I know we've been doing this for about an hour. Ryan, it's always good to talk to you. But do you want to give your company a plug real quick, buddy?
Sure. Yeah, I started a company last year. It's called Vantage Point Defense. We do executive protection. We also do security assessments for venues, for churches, for schools. PIs, we're also private investigators, and I've got another Secret Service agent that works with me, Jim, who you know very well as well. So Jim and I are hitting that together here and traveling the country, and sometimes I'm even able to travel around the world with a great family that I've been able to come in contact with.
That's good. Well, maybe.
So thank you for that. Thank you for letting me plug that.
Yeah, maybe when your company grows some big strong legs, you can hire another guy.
Heck yeah, man. We're down in Charlotte. We go down to Charlotte quite a bit.
Yeah,
So,
man. I'm not too far.
VantagePointDefense.com is the website.
Very good. Well, Ryan and Rebecca, thank you once again for your time. I really appreciate it.